For this video, we're going to have a look at engraving oak leaves and acorns. I'm going to engrave this onto the sides of a glass vase, but you could just as easily use a glass or a bottle or anything that you have for practice. This is quite a good one to practice. It is just a move on, a step on from our last video, and hopefully it won't be too complex. As for the last video, I will attach a template, the same template I'm using for my engraving, onto the description below the video, so feel free to download that and engrave along with me. You may have seen the first video in this series which used a holly leaf for a template, and if you haven't seen it, I'll try and put a link to it in the description, or maybe on the screen if I'm clever enough to do that. This one, yes, it's still a leaf, but it involves using a couple of different techniques from that first video. Firstly, the leaf is going to have to be engraved slightly differently. The holly leaf had a light coloured edge. The oak leaf does not. The veins are quite light coloured, but the edge of the leaf is not light coloured, so there's a slightly different engraving technique required there. The second thing that's different for this video is that the acorns themselves sit above the plane of the leaf in the engraving. They would be closer to us than the leaves are. So we'll have a look at the principle of layering of the engraving and how we can use that to introduce a little bit of perspective into the engraving, the idea that some things may be closer to you and some things may be further away. So I'm going to copy the image onto the glass. Now I'm lucky this is a flat-sided vase, so I don't have to worry about the paper distorting as I fit it round a curve. But it is a bit too deep for me to be able to easily slip it onto the inside and then copy it through the glass. So I'm going to tape it on up at the top here and then use a little bit of carbon paper to copy the design on. So just tape it on, slip in a little piece of carbon paper, and I'll just use a ballpoint pen to copy over all the lines. So, now that I've gone over all the lines, hopefully, when I take away the carbon paper, there, now you maybe won't be able to see that very well just at the minute, but if I put a little piece of white paper under there, hopefully you can see that the lines have transferred. Now it's obviously quite faint at this stage. I could go over all of that with a marker pen or something like that, but actually what I'm going to do is go into the workbench and I'll go over these lines with a little white Arkansas stone. So it'll mark them into the glass, but it doesn't cut them deeply into the glass. And that'll be the first part. And then once I've got that done, I'll start the engraving. Right, that's time to start the engraving. And as I said, I'm going to first of all go over the outlines with this little white Arkansas stone just to mark them a little bit onto the glass. I should say as well that I've speeded up all of the engraving sections here. I don't really work this fast, but it would take a very long time for you to sit and watch it all otherwise. Now this little white stone does mark the glass, but it does not cut deeply into it. So it's only just on the surface and it's not going to interfere at all with any later engraving. but it does mean that the marks are just that little bit more permanent on the glass and they're not going to wash off or just disappear on me. With the outlines all marked in, I can start the engraving. Now, as I mentioned at the start, I'm using a layering principle here. So the things that would be furthest away from me will be engraved right on the surface, very shallow engraving. And the thing that's furthest away is this little twig, first of all. So although I'm engraving that with a small round diamond bar, I'm not going very deep. And the other thing I'm going to engrave with that right at the start here are some of the veins on the leaf. Now some of these marks might disappear at a later stage in the engraving, but if I mark them in just now, I've got more chance of seeing where I'm trying to go with it, and I should still be able to see them and refresh them later on if I need to. If you think back to the beginning when we were looking at the oak leaf, the edges of the oak leaf are dark, but the veins are slightly lighter, and that's why I'm choosing to engrave them with this round diamond bar. It will make a whiter mark on the glass, a slightly deeper cut. Now it's time to start on the body of the leaf. Now, I'm not going to go round the whole edge of the leaf first with this diamond bar. I don't want the edge to be deeper in any way or so defined by the engraving that it becomes lighter. In the original leaf, the edge of the leaf is not a light edge. So all that I'm doing is moving this large spherical diamond bar back and forward to where the edge of the leaf needs to be. That way there isn't a risk of having a deeper edge which is going to look lighter in the finished engraving. Now the general principle for engraving is that you should use the largest bar that you have to fill the area. That reduces the number of tool marks you get, as well as speeding up the process. So this is probably the largest spherical diamond bar that I have, and it works quite quickly and makes quite a good job of this. And I'm hoping you can see now that there isn't a light edge to the leaf. It's all of a consistent tone. And when I come down to this area where the acorn sits over the leaf, I'm not going to be concerned about trying to go round the outside lines of the acorn. I'm quite happy to engrave down over it a little bit, because remember that acorn is closer to us, so it's going to be engraved quite a lot more deeply than the leaf is. And I'm going to continue going back and forward over the whole surface of all of the leaves until I've got all of these filled in. Now you'll see me wiping over the surface all the time with my finger. In part that wipes away any of the water and the glass dust that might cloud the view, but actually most of the time what I'm doing is feeling the depth of the engraving. Because for this layering technique, the depth is important, and the best way to gauge how deeply you're engraving is by feel with the tip of your finger. So for these leaves, I want them engraved just a little bit more deeply than I engraved the twig that they're sitting on, because remember, they're going to what we're trying to do is make them look as if they look a little bit closer to us than the twig does. So that engraving needs to be just slightly deeper than the twig, and feeling it all the time as I'm doing with my finger lets me feel how deeply I'm engraving. With the bigger leaves filled in, I've moved to a smaller spherical diamond burr. I did say you should always use the largest size of burr that you can, but for this little leaf, the big burr would have been too difficult to control. So this little smaller spherical burr just makes it easier for me for this smaller area. And with all the surfaces filled in, I can take quite a small diamond burr this time and just go back over the veins of the leaf where I had them before. Obviously, filling in the surface of the leaf can engrave over some of these lines. So I just need to go over and refresh them and make sure they're all still visible. And this is a good time to turn off the water dripper and dry off the surface of the engraving and start thinking about adding shading onto the leaves. It's much easier for me to do that at this point before I've put the acorns on. That way I don't need to worry about whether my shading is going to impact on the engraving of the acorn. I just look back at the little coloured drawing I did of the leaf to decide where I want the shade to sit. And it's quite a hard black bullet shaped polishing rubber I have in at the moment. It makes quite a good job fairly quickly of picking out the main shadows. I've swapped to a softer grey polishing rubber. This one's a disc shape. This is a slightly less abrasive rubber, so it isn't so good at cutting through the original engraving, but it does produce a darker tone and more of a shine on the glass, so it's quite useful at this stage to just get the very darkest areas with this grey polishing rubber. Now, wherever you add shade, you're probably also going to want to add some highlight. To do that, I've swapped back to a little spherical diamond bar, and I'm working dry this time because that gives me the very whitest tones, and just going over those areas of the leaf where I want there to be a little bit of highlight. With most of the shading and highlighting done, I can go back now and finish off the acorns. Now obviously the marks for the acorns, the edges of the acorns, I've engraved over the top of. So I need to go back in and draw those back. And because this bit of glass is already engraved, I can use a pencil for that, which is quite useful. So first, the little stems at the bottom of each acorn. I've got a round spherical diamond bar. And then, you'll remember I said use the biggest bar you can to fill in an area. So I thought I would use this very large flame bar for this. But I very quickly got annoyed with this because I wasn't getting the control I wanted with it. So I swapped back to a round spherical diamond bar, a big one. It was just easier for me to get up to the edges and make it neat. You will still see me from time to time checking the depth of the engraving with my fingers to make sure I'm getting a nice deep engraving. And I swapped to a slightly smaller spherical burr to do the little cap at the bottom of the acorn. And actually the very deepest part of the engraving is this top lip of the cap. That's the bit that's going to be closest to you, in effect. So I'm checking that one quite carefully to make sure I've got that deep enough. And I did move back to this flame-shaped diamond burr to deepen the engraving in the middle of the acorn. I want that curve so that the deepest bit is right at the middle of the acorn. Now dry it off again. I've turned off the water dripper. Dry it off and come back and start trying to get some shade in here. Now to start with, I'm using a very small green stone, silicon carbide stone here. That helps me to make sure the edges are nice and crisp, but also it's pre-polishing these areas so that they will come in a little bit darker when I go over them with the polishing rubber. This using the same stone on the bottom of the cap because that does need to be a little bit darker. So then I have the black polishing rubber, the bullet shaped one, going over those areas where I want the shade to appear. And I've swapped to the little white Arkansas stone, and I'm going to use this to mark in. There was a little dark point at the top of each acorn, so I'm pre-polishing those areas, and also there was some dark texture on the cap of the acorn. So again, I'm just putting in little marks with the white Arkansas stone and then coming back with the pencil polishing rubber to get those areas darkened, polished out and darkened, darkening the shadow at the edge of the acorn as well. I'll swap back to the black polishing rubber here. Must have decided it needed a bit more polishing. And the softer grey one right at the end, just to finish off the polish. Okay, there is the template engraved onto the vase. Now, I was trying to show you two techniques here. One was engraving the leaf without putting the edge on it first of all, to avoid that very hard edge on the leaf, a lighter edge, and I think that's worked reasonably well. The other was layering the engraving. So cutting the things that actually want to look closer to you deepest into the glass. So these acorns are cut most deeply of any of these bits of engraving, and I'm hoping that you can see that they do then appear to be at the surface of the engraving. I don't know why that works. It makes sense if you're viewing it from this side, and there's a train of thought which says that all engraved glass should be viewed from the back, if you like. And I suppose it makes sense that it looks closer to you from this side, because with it being cut more deeply into the glass, actually it is closer to you. But even this way round, layering like that, cutting this bit more deeply into the glass, makes it look like it's closer to you. Now, this is quite a big vase, and I think one little sprig of oak on it looks a bit lost. So I think I'm going to go and add some more to it, and then I'll let you see the finished version. There we go, that's it, at least mostly finished. I've simply repeated the template, or with some changes, just to fill in the front of the vase because it is quite big. But hopefully you can still see how engraving in layers, as we did, helps to make things look a little bit more three-dimensional in the finished engraving. And that's this video and this vase, just about finished. Just about finished. I may go back in and add 1 or 2 leaves just to fill it out a little more, but mostly done. I hope you found the video helpful and that you'll find something in there that you can add into your own engraving. I wish I could think of a way to let people send me photos of what they do based on these videos. If I can, well, if you know a way of doing that, please let me know, because I would love to see that. But in any case, that's this video done. Next time round I'll maybe move on and do a simple flower shape, something like that. But as I say, I hope you found it helpful. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you'll join me again for the next video.